Number 18.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I think essentially this group of amendments is trying to do the same thing. The government has made much of trying to pride itself as being sort of to the forefront of overhauling the state's industrial relations machinery. Now, we tried to get this issue raised during the discussions on the Workplace Relations Act, which was supposed to be the biggest overhaul of the system in 50 years. It was supposed to deliver a world-class workplace relations environment, and while some improvements were made, it has left a substantial group of workers, albeit retired workers, out of the process. And if we don't rectify it in this one, it's quite clear from the previous amendment that you moved, it's not going to be rectified, and it is absolutely urgent. Now, the reason why this is necessary now and wasn't when the original industrial relations machinery was set up was that traditionally, once someone was a retired worker on a pension and in receipt of that pension, then their income and their livelihood was ring-fenced and could not be touched. If there were difficulties in a pension scheme, those difficulties were dealt with by the people who were presently paying into the scheme, not the people who were already retired. So there wasn't a necessity for them, if you like. That was the justification for them not having a voice. Everything changed on that in recent legislation voted through and agreed by this government, which allowed trustees put their hands in the pockets of existing retired workers, and those decisions are being taken over the heads of retired workers. That's absolutely appalling. I mean, it really is, and the answers that we're getting to these issues in Ministers' questions are really just not good enough. Now, obviously, the Irish Aviation Superannuation Scheme has been the focus of a considerable amount of attention. There are 15,000 members of the scheme. It's as big as many a small town or even a medium-sized town. When you add in their families, you're talking about a huge body of people whose livelihoods have been impacted in this regard. They're people who paid into pension schemes all of their working lives and had a reasonable expectation that their retirement pension would be ring-fenced. I think it's particularly galling for those people that they worked in the state's national airline, some of them, and that their colleagues who worked in the United States and worked in Britain are getting the full benefits of their pension, but the ones in Ireland are seeing their retirement income decimated without them being allowed to have a say about it. I mean, it's absolutely scandalous. And I mean, when I raised it last week with the Minister for Transport, the answer I got from him was, and I'll just quote him, he said, "An agreed solution was implemented at the start of the year to address the funding difficulties in the IASS scheme. This agreed solution is a matter for the trustee, the companies participating in the scheme members and the Pensions Authority." Except it wasn't a matter for the scheme members, because the retired members were excluded from that process and didn't have a voice in any of the engagement or discussions, in any of the compensation or mitigation factors that came in. And unless we put this in now, how are those people going to get a voice? It's absolutely scandalous. And I mean, I'd love to hear the Minister's justification for why we wouldn't do this. What other scenario would you have where existing retired and deferred members or people against whose livelihoods decision can be made and they're not given a voice in something? So look, Minister, this is really urgent, and I think it's safe to say that if it's not addressed here, it's not going to be addressed anywhere else. And apart from the airport pensioners, there are many others in different defined benefit schemes as well. And the last point, Ceann Comhairle, is, you know, this idea of the government shrugging its hands and saying, "Oh, no, it's not us now. Sure, it's the trustees who made those decisions. We're very sorry for your troubles." That isn't washing with people, because the deferred and retired members know that the reason why the trustees have been empowered and enabled to take money from retired and deferred pensioners is because the government changed the law to allow them to do so. And that's where the blame will lie. And a small rectification of that now is the need to give those people at least a voice in that process to be able to have an input before decisions are made in that way.